And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Tuesday morning's flying weather. We've got a band of IFR here all the way down the west coast here to the Alaska Peninsula and Alaska Island. Mostly marginal VFR for the Aleutians, Bering Sea, and IFR here along portions of the Alaska Range, mostly in the western areas up to the north a little bit there. VFR Central Interior, North Slope, Eastern Arctic Coast, and Yakutat on down across the southeast coast, VFR to start the day with. And that holds through tomorrow afternoon. Good VFR here, right up into the eastern North Gulf Coast with some marginal VFR, Prince William Sound, and portions of the Kenai Peninsula, mostly along and east of the western Alaska Range to Kodiak Island. Central eastern part of the interior, good VFR. Central eastern North Slope and Arctic Coast VFR with some IFR hung up along the Brooks Range here. Marginal VFR, Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound area down into the Yukon Delta, Kuskokwim Delta, especially along the coast, over to Cape Newenham, Togiak there, IFR extending down to the Alaska Peninsula. Marginal VFR out west for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And for the morning hours Wednesday, still IFR here along the west coast areas and the Brooks Range with VFR to the south down across the Copper River Basin into the Valdez area, Cordova, Yakutat, all of the Panhandle looking good for Wednesday morning. And marginal VFR continues here for the western Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And then for Wednesday afternoon, finally losing the IFR here along the west coast, but still IFR there for Bristol Bay and up the east side of Kodiak Island there into the Barren Islands, maybe Kamishak Bay with marginal VFR again along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Southern Kenai Peninsula, good VFR here in the interior up to the Arctic coast. And good VFR again for the Panhandle, all the way down to Dixon Entrance, Passes, Anatuvik. IFR tomorrow, and about the same forecast for Adigan. Could improve to marginal VFR in the afternoon there. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR for both passes, marginal also for Rainy. Then back to VFR for Windy Pass, and looking good for the Eastern Alaska Range as well. Isabel and Mentasta, both VFR. VFR for Tanita and Portage, looks occasionally marginal. And for Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels here, 2,000 feet up over the Tanana Valley there. Otherwise, down across the Panhandle, 2,000 feet, and that the 2,000 foot line here south of the Aleutians. And then for the icing, a lot of moisture here over the west coast, eastern Bering Sea. So isolated moderate rime icing from western Arctic coast all the way down. And then along the Alaska Range here, along the Alaska Peninsula, southeast flow could enhance and produce some considerable moderate rime icing there. Otherwise, icing free to the east here, across the Gulf of Alaska, down across the southeast coast. And for the jet stream, upper level ridge shifting eastward here as it continues to develop and strengthen, now centered over the northwest part of Canada here. So looking good. Light northerly flow over the southern southeast coast, a broad area of south to southwest winds, anywhere from 70 to 80 knots over interior Alaska out to the eastern Bering Sea. And then the stronger jet out here to the west, northerlies, 95 knots coming down across the western Aleutians. And for 9,000 feet out west there, northerly winds, 35 to 45 knots, western Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And then south to north flow here in the interior, anywhere from 60 knots around Kodiak Island, otherwise 40 to 50 knots or 55 knots or so, mostly from the southwest up to the north. And then becoming very light under high pressure over the Copper River Basin and the Panhandle. 3,000 foot winds, pretty light over the eastern part of the state here, but a strong southerly flow at about 45 knots across the western interior here, turning southwest up to 50 knots over portions of the Arctic coast. Light winds, Copper River Basin, Tanana Valley down across the Panhandle under high pressure. And then out to the west of this trough axis here, which extends from Roughly St. Lawrence Island down to the eastern Aleutians, got northerly winds, 35 to 45 knots. Turbulence-wise, with those winds out of the north, could be some isolated moderate turbulence, Adak and Atka. Otherwise, the heavier turbulence, considerable moderate, pretty likely here for Kodiak Island up into the northeast Bristol Bay area with light to isolated moderate chop here under the windy areas there over the west central interior of the state. Otherwise smooth for the southeast coast, Copper River Basin, on up into the upper Yukon Valley.